Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Yonsei University and the opening session of the first Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum on Sustainable Development. This forum is being hosted by Yonsei University, the Institute for Global Engagement and Empowerment, and Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. With its main theme of putting people and planet at the center, the GEEF aims to advance humanity by addressing some of the most pressing issues facing the global community. And, to quote Mr. Ban Ki-moon, build a world we're proud to leave our children and grandchildren. And we are very proud and honored to serve as your MCs for this opening session. I'm joined by Mr. James Chow. He is the World Health Organization Goodwill Ambassador for Sustainable Development Goals. He was also a longtime anchor at CCTV and now serves as a special correspondent.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Very happy to be here and also to be joined by my colleague Teresa Na, who is the CEO of Oratio, and also she was the Director of Communications for the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympic Bid Committee. Well, as we were seeing on the first day, we had a really great first day to this inaugural forum, which is hosted by Yonsei, the Institute, and the Ban Ki-moon Center, and really beginning to understand yet again that the SDGs are not an option, but really a must. And who better to hear that from than the person who designed it personally, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who's extending that legacy into his new roles at the Ban Ki-moon Center, but of course over at the Institute as well. We have lots more content up ahead today, and of course we have many special speakers who are going to color the SDGs for us to help us understand how the interconnectedness requires and demands of us an aligned action.
So we're going to get started now with an opening speech by the chairman of the GEEF Organizing Committee and president of Yonsei University, Mr. Kim Yong-hak.
On behalf of Yonsei University, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural Global Engagement Empowerment Forum on Sustainable Development, hereafter GEEF. First of all, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the distinguished guests, speakers who have traveled far from many countries to be with us today, especially His Excellency Nak-yeon, Prime Minister of Korea, His Excellency António Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, His Excellency Miroslav Lajčák, President of the UN General Assembly, and our co-host, Heinz Fischer, former President of Austria, George Papandreou, former Prime Minister of Greece, Andrew Parsons, President of International Paralympics Committee, and all board members of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens in Vienna. Let me also express my sincere thanks to Chet Tae-won, Chairman of and CEO of SK Holdings, and Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Ladies and gentlemen, last April, celebrating 132nd anniversary of, in fact, birthday of Yonsei University, we announced the opening of Institute for Global Engagement and Empowerment, hereafter IGEE, and declared that Yonsei University will be socially engaged university. History of Yonsei shows that social engagement is not new. Rather, it is embedded in the very heart of our foundation. As Yonsei's founders, American and Canadian missionaries, opened an educational institution to teach the poor and cure the diseased, we opened IGEE to extend and strengthen its founding spirit by engaging in community and global problems. Last September, we were honored to have the 8th UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon join the IGEE as the honorary chair. The Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement adopted during his tenure in the UN closely resembles the vision of the IGEE. We are very, very proud to work with him to accomplish the goals he himself set up. The forum, the GEEF, is a platform for domestic and international cooperation where the progress on sustainable development is monitored and future plans are proposed. At the beginning of every year, the World Economic Forum opens at Davos on June. The European Development Days opens in Brussels, and on September, International Conference on Sustainable Development opens in New York. These important events influence the direction the world moves, yet their impact on private sector, civil society, and academia still leaves room for improvement. The GEEF, with its theme of putting people and planet at the center, aspires to fill that gap. Ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, education is a very powerful tool in promoting sustainable development. Research also supports the SDGs by providing data, analysis, and knowledge for achieving those goals. Yonsei University aims to develop a system of measurement and evaluation that accurately monitors the progress of sustainable development in each country of the world. The new composite indices that we attempt to develop, SDG Progress Report, will be published annually here at GEEF. It will be a tool to measure and evaluate the world's progress toward SDGs and will enable us to develop new strategies for developing, maintaining, and enhancing global partnership. We need your strong support. Thank you once again for participating and interest in the GEEF 2018. The weather is unusually cold now today, but I hope it's getting better tomorrow. But your passions for better world, better future is probably very, very hot. Please make your stay comfortable, and I hope you find the forum enjoyable and rewarding, both intellectually and practically. I hope to see you all of you again next year at IGE 2019, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the president of Yonsei University, Mr. Kim Yong-hak. And as he mentioned there, the GEEF will be gathering again this time next year. The dates for that will be February 14th and 15th. May we also welcome to the stage now another of our distinguished hosts of this conference. He's a face and a voice of humanity, very familiar to most people in the world, I think. Mr. Heinz Fischer, who is the former president of Austria and also the GEEF Organizing Committee Honorary Chair.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests who have been greeted so kindly by the President of this great university, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy and I'm very proud to participate on this conference, which is prepared so carefully and brings together so many people from all over the world to discuss a very central issue. Preparing for this meeting, I was also reflecting on the subject that is on our agenda. And I started by thinking that I was born just before World War II was starting, and during my lifetime, many terrible things have happened. In World War II, over 50 million people, women, men, and children died. 6 million were victims to the Holocaust. Nuclear bombs were dropped on 2 cities. In China, millions of people died on hunger. The Korean War tore apart one great country. The Cold War led us to the brink of nuclear disaster. Genocide in some regions of the world could not be prevented. But on the other hand, during my lifetime, humankind has also seen great achievements in matters of empowerment and engagement. Let me also highlight a few striking points. In my lifetime, the Declaration on Human Rights Charter found universal agreement in 1948, and we will celebrate this year its 70th birthday. In my lifetime, women's rights improved in many regions of the world, even if we agree that improvement is not enough. Equality is the goal, but I cannot overlook some important improvements. In my lifetime, we managed to fight many illnesses, and medical knowledge and medical skills improved tremendously. Technology advanced in our time exponentially, and digitalization and knowledge sharing is causing an unprecedented revolution, maybe more impactful than book printing several centuries ago. And we became more interconnected and have more information at the tip of our fingers than ever before. Distinguished guests, you will notice, and we notice, that many of humankind's advances originate from movements inspired by individuals who embraced a notion of global citizenship. Big movers always engaged and empowered. Mahatma Gandhi and the nonviolent resistance. Martin Luther King with his powerful dream of equality. Nelson Mandela, we spoke about him this morning, and his long and painful walk to freedom. Eleanor Roosevelt and the human rights, to name just a few of them. And I think the secret of positive change is to focus your energy not on fighting the old, but building the new. Therefore, let's imagine for a moment how our world could look in, let's say, 20 years from now. In the big cities of China, the air is breathable and clear. In Syria, people live in peace. Palestine and Israel have found a mutual agreeable way to respect each other. Africa is booming with its richness in natural resources. The United States spend more on education than on armament. Our oceans are recovering because pollution has decreased drastically. And women and men are really equal in numbers in positions of leadership. It's not sure, but it's possible. So let's work together to create the world that we envision with the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable development is feasible only if all countries and all stakeholders act in collaboration and in partnership, work together to take up challenges and find solutions for our common future. What is needed for that? In particular, national implementation, international cooperation, and individual dedication and engagement, all aimed at empowering to create positive change. The newly founded Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizenship will also try to do its share and contribute humbly to assist the worldwide cooperation for the realization of the 17 global goals. This cooperation means political partnership, economic partnership, scientific partnership, cultural partnership, and last but not least, the feeling of individual responsibility for our global futures. Human beings, regardless their race or nation or language, religion, political conviction, must respect the human dignity of every human being and must be active for partnership. I love really the Article 1 of the Declaration of Human Rights, which is such a wonderful language and a powerful statement. Now the world population has reached about 7.6 billion human beings, and further growth is expected. This is one of the reasons why it is so important to work on the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thanks to all of you for your engagement. Thanks to Yonsei University and the Institute for Global Engagement and Empowerment for making this impressive session today possible. Thanks also to the International Olympic Committee. Let's go out and engage and empower others. Good luck and a lot of success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Fischer, and for reminding us of the future that we can achieve if we all act together at the individual, national, and international level. Thank you very much. Allow me now to introduce our next speaker. Mr. Ho Dong-soo is the chairman of the Yonsei Board of Trustees and also chairman of GS Caltex. Please welcome Mr. Ho.
Distinguished guests, invited speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to address such distinguished participants on this very important occasion. On behalf of all the Yonsei University, I'd like to extend my warm welcome to you and thank you for coming to the 2018 Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum on Sustainable Development. In particular, I'd like to give my sincere appreciation to His Honorable the Prime Minister of Korea, Mr. António Guterres, the Secretary General of United Nations, and Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, President of the United Nations General Assembly, for making time for us in their already busy schedule. The history of Yonsei is a history of global engagement. 133 years ago, Korea was a desolate land of poverty. The first missionaries who came here set up Korea barren and poor land, where not a single tree can grow tall, and only stubbornly stay in darkness could be seen. However, the missionaries did not give up hope, nor did they leave. They established our university through their dedication and sacrifice, fed the hungry, healed the wounded, and educated future leaders. And our forerunner since then have continuously engaged actively with the needs of the society and the world. In keeping with the name Yonsei, we do not keep our knowledge within the ivory towers. We spread and connect to all corners of the world. The spirit which began Yonsei University still lives on within every one of us here and today. Last year, Yonsei University established the Institute for Global Engagement and Empowerment, and we promised to connect the needs of the world with our resources. Yonsei saw the necessity in organizing the social engagement activities and networking resources together. More than a century of engaging global problems has made Yonsei a tree of many branches. But now, the world is seeking a more coordinated, more resilient, and more sustainable solution. We are grateful that Dr. Ban Ki-moon emphasized with our vision and accepted the burden of becoming the honorary chair of the Institute. Without his presence, this forum would never have come true. We are facing unprecedented challenge in history. The surge of extreme weather patterns devastates our livelihood. Wars and acts of terror lead people away from their homes, and new emerging diseases plague us. All of these lead to one conclusion: humanity is facing a new crisis. However, new problems cannot be solved with tools of the old, and call for creative and integrative solutions. By no means can these solutions be found through the efforts of one university or one organization or one company. Government, corporations, international society, and many others must combine our experiences and wisdom to solve the problems of the world. Unless we act now, the next generation may not have a second chance. The Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum aims to promote action and catalyze cooperation between all stakeholders of the society. Partnership is an essential vehicle for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. My company, GEEF Caltex, which is the second largest oil company in Korea, also started as a partnership with Chevron of the United States of America, and having been a businessman for a long part of my life, I understand the importance of partnership also. The private sector is one of the key elements of the partnership for sustainable development and can be offered our own knowledge, its own knowledge, expertise, and resources. As Chairman Tae-won and Mr. Jang Ma will testify, we are all here to make this world better, more sustainable. I and GEEF Caltex will also do our significant duty in establishing a sustainable future. We will dedicate our knowledge and resources in partnership with Yonsei to making a better world for all. I also thank IOC and IPC leaders here today. I know well the impact of sports for sustainable development. As an agent of change, sports bring opportunities and happiness to people. With the 2018 Winter Olympics and Paralympics immediately following, I must give emphasis to partnership and the importance of working together for achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We live in the age of new challenges. Challenges can be as seen as problems, but at the same time, those challenges can be opportunities. This is the reason why we gather here today. We hope to find ways to solve the problems, to change this world, and to make it better and sustainable. On behalf of everyone at Yonsei, I again thank all of you for your presence, participation, and dedication to achieving the common goal of our time. I hope that this forum serves to widen our knowledge and vision on sustainable development. Thank you very much.
We thank Mr. Hodong-soo, Chairman of the Yonsei Board of Trustees and Chairman of GS Caltex. As we said, we are joined here, and we're delighted to be joined here by so many distinguished speakers, so many of you from abroad, but also from home. To represent the government of the Republic of Korea, please welcome Prime Minister Nak-yeon.
(2018) 글로벌 지속가능발전 포럼에 참석해 주신 여러분 감사합니다. 소중한 포럼을 조직하고 주관하신 연세대학교 김용학 총장님과 허동수 이사장님, 반기문 전 유엔사무총장님, 하인스 피셔 전 오스트리아 대통령님께 감사드립니다. 오늘 함께해 주신 안토니오 구테헤스 유엔사무총장님, 미로슬라브 라이차크 유엔총회의장님, 앤드류 파슨스 국제 패럴림픽 위원장님, 모하메드 압둘라 바레인 보건청 최고회의 의장님을 비롯한 내외 귀빈 여러분 고맙습니다. 어제 특별 대담을 가지신 알리바바 그룹 마인 회장님, 오늘 강연과 토론을 맡아주실 콜롬비아 대학 제프리 삭스 교수님, SK그룹 최태원 회장님을 비롯한 각계 전문가 여러분께도 감사드립니다. 인류는 18세기 산업혁명 이후 경제 성장의 신앙에 빠져 개발로 폭주했습니다. 개발은 인류에게 풍요를 안겨주었습니다. 그러나 20세기 들어 인류는 개발의 그림자를 목도했습니다. 적지 않은 국가들은 그런 그림자를 치유하려고 공산주의를 선택했습니다. 그러나 공산주의는 실패한 실험으로 끝났습니다. 자본주의 국가들도 자본주의의 맹점을 경험하며 해결을 모색했습니다. 20세기 벽두 미국의 안티트러스트 운동은 그런 모색의 산물이었습니다. 그러나 그것으로 자본주의의 탐욕적 본성이 치유되지는 못했습니다. 1972년 로마 클럽이 발표한 미래 예측 보고서 성장의 한계는 기존 경제 체제의 한계를 고백하며 지구 차원의 해결을 모색하는 시발이었습니다. 그러나 그 후로도 국가 간 또는 개인 간의 경제적, 사회적 격차는 커졌습니다. 가난한 나라들의 경제적, 사회적 낙후에 따른 기아, 질병, 문맹, 모성 치매 같은 고통은 완화되지 못했습니다. 많은 곡절을 겪으며 오랜 기간 모색한 끝에 유엔은 2015년에 SDG를 채택했습니다. SDG는 세계의 지속가능 발전을 위한 인류 공동의 과제와 비전을 제시했습니다. SDG 채택을 주도하신 반기문 전 사무총장님의 리더십과 비전에 경의를 표합니다. 2030년까지 SDG를 달성하기는 결코 쉽지 않아 보입니다. 인류는 SDG의 달성을 위해 훨씬 더 적극적으로 노력해야 합니다. 모든 국가와 국제기구, 기업과 학계 등의 관심과 노력, 투자와 협력이 절실합니다. 그것을 위한 지혜를 이 포럼이 모아주시기를 바랍니다. 대한민국 정부는 SDG의 달성을 위해 국제사회와 협력해왔고 앞으로도 협력을 확대하고자 합니다. 특히 개발도상국들이 직면한 문제들을 돕기 위해 ODA를 늘려갈 것입니다. 대한민국은 원조받던 나라에서 원조하는 나라로 짧은 기간에 변모했습니다. 그런 대한민국이 개도국들을 지원하는 것은 영광스러운 책임이라고 저는 믿습니다. 정부뿐만이 아니라 한국의 민간도 국제적 협력을 강화할 것입니다. 특히 기업들이 국제공헌에 더 적극적으로 동참하기를 바랍니다. 한국의 기업들은 물적 공헌뿐만 아니라 성공의 경험과 기술의 공유 같은 무형의 기여도 할 수 있을 것입니다. 내일은 대한민국에서 가장 가난하고 가장 추운 곳에서 동계올림픽이 개막됩니다. 개막식이 열리는 평창은 평화와 번창을 합친 이름입니다. 평창이 이름 그대로 인류의 평화와 번창, SDG의 달성에 기여하기를 바랍니다. 평창올림픽의 성공을 위해 여러분 모두 도와주시기 바랍니다. 대한민국은 이 포럼에서 논의될 인간, 지구, 평화, 번영, 협력의 가치를 새기며 SDG의 달성과 세계의 지속 가능 발전에 함께 하겠습니다. 대한민국 정부는 이 포럼에서 제시될 여러 해안에서 정책의 영감을 얻겠습니다. 이 자리에 모이신 세계의 지도자 여러분께서 인류의 평화와 번창을 위한 대한민국의 노력을 지지해 주시기 바랍니다. 포럼의 생산적이고 실질적인 논의를 기대합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Lee. He pledged the Republic of Korean government that we will increase ODA investments, especially for developing countries, and called it an honorable responsibility for the Korean government. We thank him for taking the time for joining us, and he must now leave us for another engagement. Thank you very much, Prime Minister Lee. Now, we also have here with us two very distinguished guests from the United Nations, Secretary General Mr. António Guterres and President of the UN General Assembly, Mr. Miroslav Lajčák.
And Mr. Guterres has very kindly agreed to take a few questions from the students here at Yonsei University. For the students, you can do the same as you did yesterday. Simply go to the IGEE Facebook page now, and you can leave your questions over there. We'll also be taking some questions from the floor. Please welcome the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's an enormous honor and an enormous pleasure to be here with all of you today. For me, in this visit to the Republic of Korea, there are three very clear objectives. First, to join my voice in the appeal for the Olympic truce and to affirm the universality of the Olympic values and the Olympic truce, independently of the political context in which the Games can take part in any place of the world. But second, to express my deep solidarity with the Korean people in this extremely important moment that I believe is a moment of tension, but I hope will be a moment of opportunity. And then finally, to be able to express my deep gratitude and appreciation to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. I was honored to work with you, Secretary General, for 9 years and to witness your vision, your wisdom, but also your strong commitment, your integrity and your honesty that were an inspiration for me and remain an inspiration for my present work in the United Nations. And I'm very glad to see that beyond the leadership that you provided in the establishment of the Sustainable Development Goals, in the Paris Agreement for climate change, you remain very active in making sure that with your centers for global citizens and for sustainable development, you are in the front line of our common struggle for a better world. Thank you very much for your very important contribution. I do believe that engagement and power are essential if we want to really transform the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals into a blueprint that can be the basis for a new deal for a fair globalization. And I think that we really need a new deal for a fair globalization. It is clear that globalization, together with technological progress, have allowed us to have an immense increase in wealth, in trade, meaningful improvements in the well-being of the majority of the population in the world, absolute reduction in relation to the most dramatic levels of poverty, improved life expectancy, decreased child mortality, and it's going on and on and on with the enormous benefits of globalization and technological progress. But it is also true that the combination of these two factors has dramatically increased inequality in our world and has left a number of very tough problems to be solved, and I would probably underline youth unemployment as the most worrying of them. Youth unemployment that here in the Republic of Korea is also felt, but that in areas like the Middle East is today a terrible threat for the lives of the people, for the progress and development of the countries, and even for the security of those countries and the international community as a whole. So we need to make sure that we use this blueprint that the Sustainable Development Goals represent to make sure that we are able to take full profit of the benefits of globalization and progressive and technological progress, but at the same time that we are able to eliminate the setbacks that we have been facing in the last decades due to the negative aspects of these same phenomena. It is true that today 8 persons in the world have the same amount of wealth of the half poorest part of the population in the world, and this is clearly unacceptable. And these facts generate, because now everybody knows what happens everywhere, generate with people left behind, regions left behind in the rust belts of this world, sectors left behind with the transformation of the productive sectors and services. This generates an increased lack of confidence of many people in relation to political establishment, to international organizations like the UN. And this is also a factor of instability in many parts of the world. On the other hand, if one looks at the global mega trends, climate change, that is, in my opinion, the defining issue of our times, but also population growth, urbanization, illegal or irregular movements of people, food insecurity, water scarcity, we see all these things combining themselves in a way that is more and more able to enhance their negative impacts and creating areas of fragility in the world that are not only a threat to global security, but are also a major obstacle for those areas to benefit from the positive impact of the Sustainable Development Goals. This means that we really need an enormous effort of engagement and empowerment to make this blueprint, the Sustainable Development Goals, the tool with which we are able to reach a fair globalization in our world. And that means we need to go beyond the diplomatic efforts, the government programs. We need to make sure that we mobilize the civil society, the academia, and especially the private sector for the resources that are needed for the goals to be achieved, to be found, and to be applied in the best possible way. And we are talking about trillions, not about the levels that usually are discussed in development cooperation programs. We need, of course, developed countries to abide by the commitments that they made in relation to official development aid, and namely in the Addis Ababa Action Plan. But we need to go far beyond to find innovative forms of financement, to make sure that we are able to leverage the resources of international financial institutions. We need to invent new instruments. The green bonds have proven its value. We need bonds of different nature for different sustainable development goals. We need to create the conditions for the private sector to be fully committed through their investments around the world, the financial markets fully supportive of all the efforts that are made for the Sustainable Development Goals to become a reality. But that requires a lot of mobilization, a lot of engagement, a lot of empowerment, and that's why a meeting like this is so important. And to do this, we also need to mobilize the UN to support member states, especially those that are more fragile in the least development areas of the world, in order for them also to do the internal reforms that are necessary in good governance, in the rule of law, to be able to attract and manage those flows of capital that need to come from the private sector, from financial institutions, and translate themselves into an effective development of the country, an effective improvement of the welfare of its population. But it's not enough that countries do their effort. It is also necessary the international community to be much more effective in fighting against tax evasion, money laundering, and illicit flows of capital that in a continent like Africa represent more than the official development aid that enters into the continent. So there's a lot of things we need to do together. There's a lot of things we need to be able to enhance in what is happening in order for the Sustainable Development Goals to be a reality and not just one other program that we adopt, but that in the end doesn't address the dramatic challenges we face in our world. And those challenges will increase. If one looks at the recent developments in artificial intelligence, what's happening in the cyberspace, the fantastic investigation that produced results in genetic engineering, we see on one hand a potential dramatic impact in labor markets, in the fabrics of societies, in the stability of countries, especially in the areas of bigger fragility. Artificial intelligence will abolish many of the jobs that today are essential in our societies. I believe that in the country where I live now, the United States, the profession with a larger number of people is truck drivers. And probably in a few years' time, we will not need any truck drivers anymore. And the same happens to many other professions around the world. So we need to make sure that in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, we do not only respond to the problems of the past, but we also respond to the problems of the future. And we engage governments, international organizations, civil society, the private sector, to create the conditions for these transformations to be absorbed by societies and for people to be able to adapt to new forms of labor relations, to probably a new balance between life in work and leisure, and to the capacity to translate into jobs many of the new developments that are taking place. But for that, a central investment is needed, and that is investment in people. And let's be clear, most governments and most international organizations have not yet understood the pace and the impact of the transformations that technological progress will originate in the 2 or 3 decades to come. And this is something that we also must have in the center of our concerns when looking into the Sustainable Development Goals. Not to mention the ethical problems, not to mention the questions of regulation, not to mention the threats that some of these technological processes also represent, independently of the enormous advantages that they can provide to humankind in our times. And this is why I believe the UN can be a platform in which all key stakeholders, private sector, academia, civil society, governments, international organizations, can join together and discuss how can we make sure, when looking at artificial intelligence, when looking at genetic engineering, that we are able to transform those new tools into tools for the good of humankind and not into threats to our own societies and to our own future. That is why meetings like these are so important. That is why we count on your engagement and your empowerment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guterres. For the interpretation?
Yeah.
Yes, if we can get an interpretation receiver for Mr. Guterres. We would now like to open up the floor for questions for Mr. Guterres. If you have a question, please raise your hand and wait for our staff to bring you a mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Sang-yap. I'm with KAIST at the Graduate School of Green Growth. Well, it is really wonderful to set the SDG goals and reach the Paris Climate Change Agreement. But as you said, to make things that happen in reality, we need to have a good politics. that can ensure sustainable commitment and policy continuity. But as SG Ban Ki-moon frequently emphasized, global agendas such as SDGs and climate change have often been hostage of domestic politics. And Mr. Trump clearly shows the case. And Korea may not be an exception. In every 5 years, we have a presidential election. And we often deny the predecessing administration's legacies. And we have every 5 years new policies that often deny or neglect sometimes policy continuity. So my question is, how can we make good politics to support the SDGs and the climate change actions we need to have?
Well, I'm afraid this is a problem each country needs to solve by itself, to find the good politicians that are able to define the good policies and to have accountability vis-à-vis the people, and the people to use the democratic tools in order to be able to guarantee that those objectives are met. But I know that this is a little bit theoretical, because in practical terms things are sometimes more difficult. Of the areas you mentioned, there is one that in my opinion is the critical one, because it can be devastating, and that is the fact that climate change is still moving faster than what we are. The fact that the Paris Agreement on climate change, that was absolutely essential, came probably later than what should have been the case, and I remember how difficult it was Copenhagen just a few years before, that the commitments made in Paris are not enough, that we need an enhanced ambition, and at the same time they are not met. And we see still people doubting about the scientific proof of climate change. I think the good news is that we are witnessing a mobilization of societies, of businesses, that are taking profit of the fact that the economic evolution and the technological evolution are proving that the green economy is today the best economy. And those that will not bet in the green economy will probably have a great future. And this is my hope. My hope is that the reality of a technological change that is making the sustainable energy cheaper than fossil fuel-based energy. And all the other, what we are witnessing about electric cars coming, that all these things will be such, and at the same time the mobilization I see in municipalities, especially in urban areas, in organizations of civil society, in industrial associations, my belief is that politicians in the end will be forced to accept, because the dynamics of the society will go faster than what many of them, not all, because we need to recognize that some have shown a remarkable leadership. It is, I think, the central battle of our times. We cannot afford to lose the battle in relation to climate change, because if things would just go as they are going now, we would lose the battle, and we would have, in the end of the century, more than 3 degrees increase with devastating consequences around the world. This is a matter for global mobilization. This is a matter for enhanced ambition if we want to have a healthy planet. And this is a battle that is not yet entirely won. And there, the pressure over those that take political decisions is absolutely crucial.
Thank you. I will join the battle. Thank you.
Secretary General, there's another question that's come in via Facebook from a student here at Yonsei University. Kim In-young actually studies sustainable development here. And she asks an intriguing question. One is, what kind of students should we be in a world at a complex time? And there was a fun add-on. It was, what kind of student were you before, like?
Well, to a certain extent, my example gives probably a potential inspiration. You know, I'm an engineer. I've never done anything related to engineering in my life. No? I worked as an economist, as a politician, as a humanitarian, now as Secretary General of the United Nations. I really have never, I'm an electrical engineer, I've never solved any problem. Even at home when there is a problem with a lamp, it's usually my wife that deals with it. But one thing that was essential when I was a student was mathematics and physics, from the point of view of the formation of the mind, from the point of view of the rationality, and at the same time in physics, the role of intuition and the capacity to look into problems based on what the problems are and not based on the demagogic things that can be said about problems. Now, today in our educational systems, it doesn't really matter much what is taught to people. What matters essentially is how people can learn to learn, and how people can learn to adapt to things that will inevitably be different in 10 years' time or in 20 years' time. And this is something that many have not yet fully understood when they design educational reforms, when they look at it. My appeal to students is to be ahead of professors and ahead of ministries of education and ask what is needed to prepare themselves for a world that nobody knows exactly how it will be, which means to give them the tools of reasoning, of adaptation, of the capacity to change and to use those areas of background that allow them to be prepared for whatever future will come, for whatever profession will come. My best advice is for those that are looking into educational reforms and for those that are looking into their own experiences as students, prepare everything for a world we don't know how it will be.
Now, Mr. Guterres, we only have a couple more minutes with you, so if I may, I'd like to ask a question as well. We have many students here who are very eagerly listening to your speech. I think they all want to do something, as we just heard in that previous question as well. They want to do something, they want to contribute to the SDGs as well. So maybe a connection with the previous question, but what should they do, not just as a student, but what action can they take right now to help with the SDGs?
Well, there are many things people can do. They can be politically involved. They can be involved in advocacy. They can enter into civil society organizations that have a role to play, be it in education or health or climate or any other of the Sustainable Development Goals objectives. They can engage in international, today we can network internationally thanks to the cyberspace. They can engage with international organizations around the world, create movements, be able to express publicly and effectively your concerns, and at the same time, they can, some of them, join as volunteers in action. I have had in UNHCR a large number of students that would come to work as volunteers in different areas of the world. So lots of things that can be done, but the most important thing is to fully assume your global citizenship in the citizenship of your own country, and to make sure that in the citizenship of your own country, independently of sometimes people say, oh, now we don't trust politics, we don't trust political establishments, so let's do our... The truth is that we need to be able, for those that are committed to the Sustainable Development Goals and other important objectives, not to give up on getting involved in the politics in their own country and getting involved in making sure that they can also contribute to the reforms of political establishments that are necessary for political establishments to be able to adapt to a changing world.
Secretary General, we could just use the time for one more question. There's, I think the lady in the second row had your hand up just then, and we'll use this as the last one.
Hello, Secretary General. It is my great honor to be welcoming you at Yonsei University. I'm actually the one who gave you the question on what kind of student you were. While you have gave us inspiring response, I have a question about our senior members of the society. In a time of history where aging societies are where the problem of the aging society is getting extreme, how can our elderly members prepare for their extended lives and vastly changing trends? Thank you.
Well, it is clear that with aging societies, there are two questions that need to be addressed. One is a different balance between leisure and work at lifetime and leisure at work even permanently. I think with the technological evolution we are witnessing, we will be able, in my opinion, to cope with the problems of societies in which the labor force is much smaller compared with the totality of the population, based on meaningful increase in productivity that will allow it to be possible and to allow life to be more than just work, and then get a retirement when it is too late. But at the same time, aging societies also demonstrate one thing, at least in my part of the world. Migration is an important component of the solution of today's problems. Migration is now, as you know, very negatively perceived in several parts of the world, and there is a lot of campaigns against migration, the expression of xenophobic sentiments and things of the sort. But I'll give you an example of my mother. My mother is 95 years old. She has always someone taking care of her. She wants to live in her own house. Of course, we visit her. I only visit her now once a month. But I call her every day on the phone. But there is always one person. There's a company that provides this service. Always one person taking care of her. I've never seen a Portuguese taking care of my mother. It's always a migrant worker. And if I look at European societies where there is this huge reaction against migration in many countries, there is no way Europeans can take care of their elderly people without a meaningful number of migrants from other parts of the world helping them to do the job. So this question of aging societies will also force us not only to think about productivity, labor, leisure relations and things of the sort, but will also show that the demographics have their consequences, and one of the consequences of the demographics is that we need to look into migration as a positive thing. And when something is positive, it's better to manage it instead of to let it happen in an irregular way, letting smugglers and traffickers being the ones that are now regulating the migration flows in the world, which is absolutely unacceptable. We need more opportunities of legal migration. We need better cooperation between countries of origin, countries of destination, countries of transit, and we need to understand that diversity in societies is a richness. It is not a threat. It is something we should cherish, doing everything possible for everybody to feel that they belong to the community where they live.
Thank you very much. So we'd like to give a big round of applause to Mr. António Guterres, of course. Thank you very much. We'd also like to thank those of you who gave us questions, especially Kim In-young for posing 2, or was it 3, really good questions as well. And hopefully you'll keep them coming for our next speaker as well. We will now turn the floor over to Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, President of the United Nations General Assembly. Please welcome Mr. Lajčák.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be here with you today, and I want to thank Dr. Ban Ki-moon, former Secretary General, for inviting me. I would also like to join the words of respect and admiration expressed by Secretary General António Guterres, and I want to thank you very much for your great service to humanity during your mandate as the United Nations Secretary General. Ladies and gentlemen, I was asked to speak about multilateralism in a turbulent world, and I want to make 2 points right at the beginning. First, which is obvious, that yes, we indeed live in turbulent times, and second, we tend to take multilateralism for granted. So I want to thank the Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum on Sustainable Development for the opportunity to discuss this very pertinent issue, and I would like to use this opportunity to make 3 points. The first one is about turbulence. We usually talk about this in the context of air travel, but whether it's hitting our economies, our societies, or our airplanes, turbulence works always the same way, because it affects everything in its path. It does not matter what we have done to protect ourselves, or how tightly we strapped ourselves in. Once it hits, it's felt by every passenger on the plane, or every member of the society. And we must all come out of it together, or not at all. And this is the same for the challenges facing our world today. Take, for example, a breakout of conflict in a small Libyan town. People who are not living in the country or near its borders may feel unaffected, but this violence could aid to recruitment of terrorist fighters, or it could force people to turn to human traffickers, desperate to flee out. And these two developments could and would probably have implications thousands of miles away. So, not all of us will suffer if a major African city runs out of water, or if a hurricane devastates a Caribbean island, or if a bomb blast or a missile launch happen in a different time zone from ours. But all of us will feel the effects eventually. And this is not a speculation. This is clear from the data, it's clear from the facts, and it's clear from the stories we read and hear every day. So we need to face a new reality. We no longer live in the world of once-off or standalone crises. And that's why we can no longer rely on once-off or standalone solutions. So the demand for multilateralism will grow, even if some leaders or politicians say otherwise. Because this is not a trend dictated by politics. It's caused by the nature of the world we live in and the kind of turbulences we face. And when it comes to meeting this demand for multilateralism, the United Nations must lead the charge, and that's my second point. Here, I want to acknowledge the fact that from time to time we hear criticism against the United Nations, and we cannot hide from them. We must face up to them, and we must work even harder to address them. But on this, I want to say something important. While we can always work to strengthen the United Nations, we can never replace it. We should work to improve it, but we should not and we cannot give up on it. The United Nations plays a unique role in our world, a role which billions of people depend on. Because in short, the United Nations can do things no one else can. To highlight this, I can give you 3 examples. The one is the case of Colombia. In 2016, the peace agreement was reached between the government of Colombia and the FARC rebels. The deal was hard-won and was very fragile. It was not clear whether the deal would halt, so the United Nations was called in, and the UN mission was quickly established in the most remote and hard-to-reach places in Colombia. And it was received as a legitimate and objective actor by both parties, and plays a unique role to monitor and verify the implementation of the agreement. And the peace accord holds, and the arrangement helps for the government to reach out to other groups as well. Or the second example is the situation in Liberia. Hundreds of UN peacekeepers were sent into the country to protect the fragile peace after the peace deal was reached in 2003. Now, last year, we had the presidential elections, and the role of the UN presence there has evolved and adapted, and it served there to monitor the elections and to help with the evidence and registration of voters. And the mission will leave the country in March this year, and it will be a different mission in a different country, which shows the ability of the United Nations to adapt to changing circumstances. And finally, when we talk about the irreplaceable role of the United Nations, of course, we cannot not mention the Sustainable Development Goals. There are many champions of SDGs here in this room today, and I know that there will be lots of discussions about them, and rightly so. For many of us, the SDGs have become part of our everyday lives. We read about them on social networks. We discuss them in almost every intergovernmental events. We have become used to them. For us, they no longer represent a new concept. But let me take us all back a few years to remind us how new this concept once was. A universal framework, the one that applied to rich and poor countries alike, the one that spanned diverse and complex issues, from education to access to justice, and the one that bound us all to the same goals and to the same targets. At one point in time, this would have been seen unthinkable. And if the United Nations was not here, it would still be unthinkable today. So here I want to say that there is indeed space for other multilateral entities. Some of them might even be more advantageous compared to the United Nations. They might act faster, they might have bigger budgets or better equipment. But the United Nations must remain at the helm of the multilateral system. It is our world parliament. It is our most legitimate global actor. And it is our best chance to tackle the turbulences that lie ahead. And on that note, my third point today is to look ahead. You have just heard from the Secretary General António Guterres about his vision for the future of the United Nations. And he made it very clear that steps are being taken to make this vision a reality. The United Nations is adapted, and it's working to fit in with these new realities. A change is in motion. First of all, the United Nations member states are considering very concrete proposals how to reform the organization. Secretary General António Guterres proposed 3 reforms dealing with the peace and security architecture, with the repositioning of the UN development system, and with the management issues. And these 3 reforms are now being considered by the General Assembly. At the same time, work continues on the reform of the United Nations Security Council and also the revitalization of the work of the UN General Assembly. My role in all this is to make sure that all these processes are credible and inclusive. And there are also other opportunities for the United Nations to strengthen its work. And I'm going to focus on a few of them in particular during this current session of the General Assembly. First among them is peace and prevention, because the fact is that there is no room for complacency. We have managed to prevent the global conflict, but there are too many local and regional conflicts, and we are paying attention to this at the United Nations. We understand that the United Nations could and should do more to prevent conflicts, and it has all the necessary tools, it has all the rooms to meet and negotiate, it has the mediators and the peace builders to support and deploy, and it has the expertise and experience to apply. So we need to use all these tools to act better, faster, and at earlier stage. And this is what we call sustaining peace, and that's the concept that we are promoting and building in the United Nations. And I'm going to organize a big event on sustaining peace in April this year, and I hope to see many of you in New York discussing how to prevent conflict and sustain peace better. The second very important issue that the United Nations is dealing with right now is migration, and again the Secretary General referred to it already. It's a global phenomenon. No matter whether we like it or not, it's here and it's here to stay. So it's logical that we need to be able to address it, to manage it, because up until now there has been no global response to a global phenomenon on migration. We have been reacting on a national and ad hoc basis. Now, for the first time, we have a chance to take the initiative and to adopt a first ever global document dealing with migration, which is called Global Compact for Safe, Regular and Orderly Migration. The process, the final and most important part, intergovernmental negotiations of this process are starting now in February, and we have a hope that we will adopt a good document by July. And of course, Sustainable Development Goals. We have to make sure that we stay the course, that we stay focused. Many UN bodies and entities are working on a daily basis to promote and to make sure that we reach our goals. I'm also going to contribute to this, and we are going to deal with several aspects. Probably the most sensitive one is financing for development, because the great thing is that we have adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a global blueprint, global plan for transformation of our planet by 2030. But the bad thing is that we do not have enough financial resources to meet our global goals by 2030. We need to address the financial gap, and the gap is huge. we are lacking some $3 trillion a year to meet the 2030 agenda by 2030. At the same time, we speak about some 4% of the global GDP, and the money is there. So the question is how to link the money with our goals, and this is what we are doing, and I'm going to organize an event on financing for development in June this year. At the same time, we are thinking about young people at the United Nations, because everything we do, of course, is to protect this planet and to make it a better place for life, for future generations, and we are going to invite young people to the UN General Assembly Hall in May to hear from them about their expectations, about their vision of the world, and about how they see the role of the United Nations. And out of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are all equally important, there is one that plays prominent role this year, which is water. We are going to review the SDG 6 on water, and in March we are going to launch International Decade Water on Sustainable Development, and we will use this to highlight the importance of water for our future. At the same time, obviously, we must not forget about the issue of human rights that must be part of everything we do in the United Nations, and of course, place enough attention and focus on equal participation and leadership of women. And here the Secretary General is a true leader, and he's promoting this agenda in every day of his work. So, ladies and gentlemen, as it was clear from the words of my previous speakers and my own words, we are living in difficult, turbulent times, and there is, of course, no need to stress this here in Seoul, because people on the Korean Peninsula have been in the path of these turbulences for years, and recently this turbulence has become even more violent, and it threatens to destabilize our entire global community, and therefore it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed urgently. We cannot recycle old methods and messages. We need creativity, flexibility, and new ideas. Bilateral efforts must intensify, and even stronger multilateral support must be given to these efforts. And today's forum offers another opportunity for dialogue and cooperation. So, in conclusion, let me stress that we cannot take multilateralism for granted, because if we do, we will fail to take the threats facing it seriously. And then it will be impossible for us to defend against them until it's too late. So these threats are not obvious, but they are clearly here, and they pose a risk to our rule-based system, which could be eroded from underneath us. We run the risk that the frameworks and norms we spent decades to build up will come crashing down. A risk that our future generations will learn only about the ideal, but not about the practice of global multilateralism. And the biggest risk of all would be that our world could return to the way it was before 1945, when the United Nations was created, when rules were set by those with the most power and the strongest militaries, when alliances were built only on defense and interests and not on progress, when cooperation was used to further individual gains, and when the ambitions and ideologies of some could bring us all to our knees. We must never allow this. We must stand up, we must speak out, and we must champion multilateralism. I thank you very much for your attention.
So we've opened up the Facebook space for questions for the PGA. And Mr. Lajčák, a couple of questions referred to the current times, the shifting geopolitical landscape which we're now encountering. The SDGs are not new, they're over 2 years old, but already in the last 12 months, a lot has changed. The aftermath of Brexit, for example, a different US administration, and still the refugee crisis, which has gone into the heart of Europe, and many, many more examples. A lot of people are pointing out the expansion in nationalism and a love of borders and inward thinking that some of our other speakers have already referenced. The question, though, would be, do these now threaten the involvement of the Sustainable Development Goals since they were committed to by those over 190 countries?
Yes, I believe there is a real threat to the multilateralism and instruments of multilateralism, including the Sustainable Development Goals. We see growing nationalism selfishness, egoism in the acts and behavior of individual politicians and individual countries. And therefore, we must protect the rules-based system, because that's the only way how to make sure that every country has its interests protected, that the rules are set universally and not enforced or imposed by the big and strong ones to serve their interests. And as I said, this cannot be taken for granted. Sustainable development goals are the expression of our global responsibility and awareness of the dangers facing our planet. So we must be able to offer answers to the questions people are asking themselves. Because the big risk the politicians are running and the big mistake they are making is that they, way too often, is that they speak about things people don't understand, and they don't speak about things people do understand. They are not providing answers to the questions people ask themselves. So migration is one of them. Migration is here. Every person in this room, every person on this planet has one way or another been confronted with migration. And yet we have no instrument, we have no common approach, we have no common philosophy. So this is what we are trying to do this year, and it's really important that the international organizations are seen and appreciated by our people as the right framework to ask the question and to get the right answers. But this is not only the responsibility of the organizations, it's the responsibility of every politician, every member state, and every citizen. So let us work towards that goal.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one question, so I'd like to open up the floor. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Okay, I saw you first. Maybe fifth row from the back. Please hand him a mic. No, keep holding your hand up. Yes?
Yes, thank you for this opportunity to present you with a question. You referenced the event of Brexit along with the change in the US administration. The question that I have is that the thing about these events is that they're not top-down events, they're bottom-up events. Through the means of elections, citizens are communicating to their government that they want less global involvement. So how do you engage the citizens of the country to sort of say, this is something that would benefit you on a domestic level, when right now the thing that connects most of the events is people want less, not more engagement. And what's happening is individual people, citizens, it's not governments that's necessarily turning against the global environment. It's their citizens telling them we want less. How do you defy the will of your own citizens? Thank you.
No, you must never defy the will of your citizens, but I'm not sure that this is exactly what our citizens want. The fact is that the citizens are protesting to the way traditional politics has been done, because they don't see traditional politics protecting them in difficult times. And we have been going through difficult times, and here I refer mostly to the global financial crisis that broke out in 2009, but also the huge wave of migration, which again found us unprepared. And these are the times when you have politicians who come and say, don't listen to your authorities, I have better solution. I know the easy way out. Believe me, there is no easy way out. And these people who unfortunately are gaining on popularity and strength and are elected in high positions in many countries now have one thing in common, that they are good at criticizing what's there, but they are very weak, very bad, and offering an alternative. And let me tell you, there is no alternative to a global responsibility, to a system which is based on global rules. It took us decades to build this system on the ashes after the World War II. That's why the United Nations was created, and the regional organizations, to make sure that we will never ever find ourselves in the situation when individual interests of certain countries will cause a global drama and global tragedy on the world. So I don't want to go again the full circle, to come to the point, to the square one, to find out that there is no easy way out, and all these populists have no solutions. And the best way how to counter these people is to ask them, what's your proposal? What's your proposal? And we will see this very, very soon. I think Brexit is one of the good examples, that you are promising something you are unable to deliver, and there are many others. But obviously, this is also a great challenge for what we call standard, traditional, and I would say responsible politicians. That we have to listen to our people. We have to make sure that we work for them, we work on their behalf, on their mandate. And they must understand what we do, and they must support what we do, otherwise we'll be irrelevant. That's why the theme of my presidency of the United Nations General Assembly is focusing on people, striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet. So let us not forget for a minute that it's the people who matters, and if we do not convince them, then somebody else will.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Miroslav Lajčák. Another round of applause for the President of the UN General Assembly, and thank you for your questions. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you're all very well aware, of course, we're just one day away now from the start of the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympic Games. And just in time, GEEF has teamed up with the International Olympic Committee.
We know that many of our guests will be heading over to Pyeongchang for the opening ceremony, and I think that the focus of the world is now going to be centered on one very specific part of the world, with sports bringing humanity together in its own unique way. For that, we'd love to welcome to the stage now Mr. Mara Pescanti, who's going to deliver a special message to GEEF on behalf of the IOC President Thomas Bach.
President Nak-yeon, Excellencies, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. President of the UN General Assembly, Mr. UN Secretary General, distinguished guests, and the friends of sport. It is an honor for me to address you on behalf of the President of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, who is sorry he cannot hear. With the Olympic Winter Games Pyeongchang 2018 just around the corner, the global and the symbolic concept of the Olympic truce is more than ever relevant today. At a time of global uncertainty and tension, the Olympic Games will provide a safe space, like in antique times, for competition and camaraderie for athletes from around the world. In the daily diplomacy of sport, many examples come to our mind. The friendship between Owens and Long on the long jump podium of the 1936 Berlin Games, the numerous peace games or peace marathon which are happening in many difficult places of the world, or the case of rugby, Nelson Mandela and South Africa. The IOC and the United Nations share the objective of making the world a better and a more peaceful place. For us, this means putting sport at the service of the peaceful development of humanity. The Olympic Truce Resolution calls on the nations of the world to uphold this truce for the time of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. This specific call, which was unanimously renewed by the United Nations General Assembly last November, recognizes the power of sport and the symbolic relevance of the Olympic truce in our modern world. In doing so, the 3,000-year-old ancient Greek tradition of kekeria will continue to resonate with the new generation and can demonstrate, as the founder of the Olympic movement, Pierre de Coubertin, once said, that the Olympic Games are a pilgrimage to the past and an act of faith in the future. Beyond the safe passage of athletes and spectators, the Olympic truce aims to mobilize citizens of the world, and the youth in particular, around the promotion of the Olympic ideals. This takes an especially important significance, given the time and the location, about all the location of these Olympic Winter Games. The unified Korean Olympic team, which will march tomorrow at the opening ceremony, and the athletes from the National Olympic Committee of North Korea who compete in a unified women's hockey team are a great example of the power of these ideals. Ladies and gentlemen, over and beyond the games themselves, we believe that sport and the sport sector at large are a natural partner when it comes to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Likewise, we are proud of the fact that in 2015, sport was recognized, and thank also the former General Secretary Ban Ki-moon, recognized as an important enabler of sustainable development as included in the United Nations Agenda 2013. Sport and the physical activity are constructed avenues that can help to tackle some of the most urgent health issues, such as obesity and non-communicable disease. Fostering gender equality and strengthening women's empowerment in and through sport is also at the core of our mission. The theme of the International Women's Day, the time for progress is now. Likewise, our IOC sustainable strategy reaffirms our commitment to including sustainability in all aspects of the Games and the Olympic movement daily competition. As we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, let me reiterate that sport at the service of humanity must go hand in hand with human rights, putting people at the center. The principle of non-discrimination, all people are equal regardless of their race, gender, social status, cultural background or belief, allows sport to promote peace and mutual understanding all over the world. Our effort through sport-based integration program for refugees and the newly established Olympic Refugee Foundation are a few examples of how we turn this principle into concrete action. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Olympic Games have always shown another face of our world, the face of peace. Not only silent arms, but also the meaning of tolerance, of non-discrimination, assistance to athletes in low-income countries, or the beautiful reality of the refugees Olympic team. Our hope is that this spirit lives on after the Games. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, this fair tale of the Pyeongchang Olympic and Paralympic Games is turned to be an happy end. Tomorrow, on occasion of the Olympic ceremony concerning the opening the Games, the Olympic movement will celebrate an historic moment. Sport and the United Nations succeeded to open a door, an important door, between North and South Korea, North Korean and South Korean people. That means to create a feeling, an atmosphere of peace. For the next future, the IOC, all the world, hopes that after the end of the Games, a less far-sighted policy will not close again the door. We are optimists, and the IOC wished Good luck to the people of the Peninsula, Korea. Good luck, all the people. Thank you, Korea. 감사합니다, Korea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mario Pescante, IOC member from Italy, for your message. Now, 1 month later, of course, on March 8th, the Pyeongchang Paralympic Games will begin. And right now we have with us, representing the International Paralympic Committee, President, Mr. Andrew Parsons. Please welcome Mr. Parsons.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's an honor to be here at the Yonsei University for this inaugural Global Forum. The Paralympic movement aspires to provide a better world, a more inclusive world for people with a disability through sport. Sport is the vehicle, a strong one. The performances of athletes inspire the world. But if sport is the vehicle, then people must be the focus and the driver of that vehicle. By putting people at the center of everything that we do, the Paralympic movement creates pathways and enables para-athletes to generate societal change through positive experiences. Sport is one of the most powerful tool for inclusion, education, and citizenship. Sport teaches values such as respect, determination, friendship, hard work, fair play, and equality. Values that are integral to the wider society. Sport teaches how to win and how to lose with dignity and generosity. In the starting block of a race or in the starting block of life, we must all be equal. We all must enjoy the same opportunities. But today's sport is at a crossroads. If sport can show the best of mankind, sadly, it also can show some of its worst too. Corruption scandals, doping, and political interference, to name but a few, are all negative factors that are threatening the values of sport and therefore the values of society. Sport is becoming a business and in danger of becoming a business only. As IPC president, I am determined that the organization I am responsible for remains a sport organization that operates like a business, not a business that has sport as a product. It's time to put sport back on the right track. There is no halfway in integrity. There is no halfway in integrity. There is a need to fight hard so that the true values of sport do not vanish into the night. It's a collective effort. We all have responsibility. Sport organizations, international organizations, NGOs, governments, media, sponsors, and athletes. Above all, athlete participation is fundamental. We must all understand that the world is changing and we cannot afford for sport to lose its relevance. The time is now. Today's generation demands not only higher purpose, but also higher methods. It is not only about what, but also about how. There is no space in the world anymore for lack of transparency, lack of openness, and lack of collective decision-making processes. We must change the way we interact with this planet. Otherwise, in the future, there will be no planet to interact with, at least not the planet as we know it. It is only through open dialogue, sharing, and collaboration that we can put sports and the world back on track. This is why I would like to congratulate Mr. Young Hak Kim, Mr. Heinz Fischer, Mr. Ban Ki-moon for this inaugural Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum on Sustainable Development here at the Yonsei University. I have no doubt that some of the discussions taking place here will help build bridges, improve dialogue, and generate bold ideas for our collective future. I wish all the participants a great forum. To the Olympic movement, success to the Games starting tomorrow. And I would like to invite you all to the Pyeongchang 2018 Paralympic Winter Games, starting on March the 9th, where once again, Paralympic athletes will inspire and excite the world with their sport excellence. Thank you very much.
Our thanks to Andrew Parsons, the President of the International Paralympic Committee. And exactly 30 years after this city hosted the Summer Olympics, it must be a very proud moment for the winter edition of the Olympic Games to be returning to South Korea, and of course on a personal level with Mr. Ban Ki-moon being the chair of the IOC Ethics Commission. We move now to a special message from the President of Ghana, Mr. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, who is one of the 17 United Nations SDG advocates. Here to deliver his message, please welcome Ghana's ambassador to Korea, Ms. Difi Ajoko Kusi.
Mr. Chairman, all the national and international luminaries assembled here today, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be invited for this special occasion to convey this all-important message on behalf of the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, highlighting the challenges and solutions for sustainable development. Let me first and foremost seize the opportunity to acknowledge the presence of the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. António Guterres. I believe that the leadership exhibited by the United Nations in this endeavor will facilitate the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals for the benefit of humanity. Indeed, the achievement of these set goals will fulfill the aspirations of the global community and make the world a better place for current and future generations. Permit me to also congratulate Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the immediate past Secretary General of the UN, for the vision of establishing the Center for Sustainable Development with the overall aim of addressing difficult challenges confronting the world, an attestation to his unflinching dedication to the resolution of critical global issues. Mr. Chairman, the Brundtland Report defines sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And its three pillars have been identified by the World Bank Group as economic growth, environmental stewardship, and social inclusion. Going by the above definition, the SDGs are truly a worthwhile set of goals for the world. Indeed, one cannot deny the fact that the major challenges facing the world these contemporary times include the alarming rate of environmental degradation, poverty, hunger, disease, lack of education, of clean water, unemployment, and the absence of peace and justice. Let us not forget that all the problems enumerated above will only escalate if frantic efforts are not made in dealing with them. They will impose devastating consequences on the social and economic well-being of countries, regions, as well as the entire planet. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the commitment we all make today towards enhancing a good future for all may pay off in the not-too-distant future. And I therefore congratulate all nations and stakeholders for accepting the challenge to implement the SDGs. It also requires every stakeholder on this journey to ensure that the objectives of Agenda 2030 are attained for human security. All the initiatives towards sustaining the world's future for sustainable development must be pursued vigorously, as this is the only way that success will be achieved. In doing this, institutions must be strengthened to allow the rule of law and justice in every system of democracy. Civil society participation must be given credence and recognition in every governmental setup to convey the voice of the people. A system of equity, justice, and fairness is the only way of building a cohesive and problem-free society. It is also my considered opinion that public-private sector collaboration, when given the necessary attention, would play a critical role in meeting the SDGs, and therefore must be given the necessary backing by all governments to help in the path to success. And if it does, the benefits shall be reaped by all of us. My appeal, therefore, is that public-private partnerships be given priority and be empowered with all the incentives for championing the SDGs. We must create the enabling environment for teamwork to prosper and lend the support which will impact positively on the achievements of the ideals of the SDGs in every aspect. Ghana has adopted a number of policy measures with private sector involvement which are targeted at achieving the SDGs, and the government will continue to do more in that regard. Mr. Chairman, I accepted the challenge to co-chair the group of eminent advocates for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in September 2017, alongside my colleague, Mr. Prime Minister of Norway, Her Excellency Mrs. Erna Solberg, and I have the conviction that together with the expertise of other well-meaning people, we shall succeed. My acceptance was also to demonstrate my commitment for the realization of this goal. Following my inauguration in Accra, I formed a high-level ministerial committee with various roles which will oversee the progress of SDG implementation in Ghana. In order to integrate the SDG agenda into Ghana's national development strategies, an interministerial national implementation committee has also been formed to provide strategic direction for coordinating the implementation of the SDGs. In addition, a civil society platform has been set up to enhance collaboration between civil organizations and government on implementation and monitoring. A free senior high school program which aims to guarantee secondary education for all Ghana's children was introduced in 2017. The program will ensure that all children will be educated to at least secondary level, and money, or the lack of it, will no longer mean a denial of education. This has already led to an increase in secondary school enrollment by over 90,000 children this academic year. Children who would otherwise have dropped out at this stage. SDG 4, aimed at ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all, will be within our reach by the target date. In April 2017, Ghana also launched a program called Planting for Jobs and Food. The program is expected to increase the production of most of Ghana's staple food products like maize, rice, and sorghum from current production levels. It is also anticipated to create sustainable jobs for the teeming Ghanaian youth in accordance with SDGs 2 and 8. As the AU gender advocate, the realization of gender equality remains a priority. Ghana launched the He for She campaign, championed by UN Women. The campaign seeks to mobilize over 2 million men to stand up and support women and take actions that will lead to empowerment and gender equality for both men and women as stipulated in SDG 5. Indeed, let me state that while in New York recently, I reiterated my stance towards Ghana's industrial transformation, diversification of agriculture for increased productivity, and creating a strong social services sector. All these measures were carefully taken as steps for addressing social and economic problems facing society. I shall continue to pursue the SDG agenda by rallying my fellow leaders to join hands with me to harness our planet's potentials in tackling the overarching challenges bedeviling the project ahead of us. Let me conclude by thanking the organizers, and in particular, former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for this laudable initiative, which will in no small way help in keeping the SDG issues on the front burners. I thank you for this opportunity to be allowed to add my voice to the debate. Long live sustainable development, long live Agenda 2030. Thank you.
We thank the President of Ghana for his message delivered by Ambassador Difie Ajarko Kushi. Finally, we have a video message from the Chief Executive Officer of Unilever, Mr. Paul Polman, who is also a UN SDG advocate. So please direct your attention to the screens.
Well, hello everyone. I'm sorry I can't be there with you today, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to say a few words of support via video. I do so with some humility, knowing that many of you are already working very hard for greater stability, peace, and prosperity in this world. So let me start by saying thank you. Thank you for all that you are doing. And a special thank you to my friend and the former Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon. Your leadership has been instrumental in creating a brighter future for all, and it has been such an honor to work with you during your time at the United Nations. In today's world, it can be easy to become dispirited, with the collapse of trust, increasing conflicts, and rising unrests. But in fact, in the long history of humanity, I believe that we are actually living during the best of times. A smaller share of the world's population is hungry, impoverished, or illiterate than at any time before. A smaller proportion of children die than ever before. Every day, the number of people around the world living in extreme poverty actually goes down by 217,000. And 300,000 more gain access to clean drinking water every day. We're also witnessing an incredible tipping point on many fronts. Much of these are driven by emerging coalitions as well as market momentum, from renewable energy to electric vehicles, and from sustainable palm oil to reductions in food loss and waste. But there is no question that the world still faces tremendous challenges. And these challenges are accelerating and growing increasingly connected, with the margin of error disappearing. For example, on climate change, we are still projecting to exceed the 2 degrees, whilst we know that we can at best afford 1.5 degrees of global warming. We're also moving backwards on forest loss, which was actually up 51% in 2016 versus a year ago. We're equally stuck by the daily reminders of the devastating effects of ocean acidification, natural disasters, and the fast increasing amounts of waste, such as the plastic, that we daily see in our oceans. And yes, we're still living in a world where the effects of wealth creation seem to only be reserved for the already well-off 1% of the richest citizens of this world. It is critical, though, that we not dwell on admiring the problem, but start to focus increasingly on the actions. What we need to do is make things happen at speed and scale. And the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development gives us a roadmap for doing this. It recognizes that to achieve our ambitions, we need new ways of working. And that to go from the millions to the billions, We need to harness the power of the markets. No sector, no company, and no single government can tackle these enormous issues alone. Business is a critical stakeholder to us. And the good news is that we're seeing positive momentum. The work of the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, for example, has helped catalyze a mindset shift by showing the compelling business opportunities that the SDG represents. In fact, the SDGs would unlock $12 trillion of economic opportunity and create 380 million jobs by 2030 alone. Now, business is leading, especially where government is leaving a vacuum of leadership. And we are already seeing an increasing number of businesses embedding the SDGs into their actual strategies. A recent survey showed that nearly 18% of the companies align their sustainable management systems with the SDGs. And 15% use the SDGs as an aid for their sustainable reporting. Now, there's recognition from governments, UN, civil society, that business needs to be an active participant. Encouragingly, 90% of the voluntary reviews by the countries acknowledge the critical role of the private sector. Now, we're clearly seeing a pickup of initiatives globally, driven by organizations as diverse as the International Chamber of Commerce, to the UN Global Compact, as well as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development or the World Economic Forum. A clear example of business coming together for collective action and impact at scale. And it's now more important than ever before that businesses, governments, and society step up to create the partnerships to deliver the SDGs and drive impact at scale. All SDGs are equally important, but we cannot achieve them without SDG 17 on partnership for the goals. We have a unique opportunity, and now is not the time to pause. Now is indeed the time to accelerate. I applaud your efforts to host this conference and to further strengthen our joint partnership for the goals. I thank you for listening, and I hope to see many of you soon. Have a successful conference, and thanks for the opportunity.
That special message there from SDG advocate and the CEO of Unilever, Mr. Paul Polman. Well, this wraps up the opening session of the Global Engagement and Empowerment Forum on Sustainable Development here in Seoul. We call it the inaugural forum, and we're delighted to share with you that there will be a second edition of this conference on February 14th and 15th of 2019.